SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello viewers, welcome to MOOC's online course on modern Indian art from the colonial period to the present. Throughout this course, till the last one, that is the lecture number 17, we have been mostly looking at the developments of modern Indian art in the mainstream history. Now, we know that in terms of the wider cultural matrix of India, beside the mainstream culture, we also have a very rich tradition of folk culture, tribal culture, that is, in other words, indigenous cultures. They also have their own visual art traditions. Almost every nook and corner of India, we find a very powerful, conventional, and a long, age-old long tradition of visual art, performance, music, oral literature, tapestry, weaving, pottery, sculpture, whatnot. Now, when we talk about modernism in art in India, we often do not look at that part of Indian culture, because the general conception is, whereas the modernity or the modern art we are talking about is mostly based in different cities of India. So far we have been talking about Kolkata, Bombay, Delhi, Madras. But apart from these cities, this urban centric art, we also have village centric art traditions, the rural arts, that is the folk art or tribal art. So the question is there any possibility of these folk and tribal art traditions, that is the rural art traditions, to receive any impact or impression of modernism, or it is only meant for the urban art practices? So today we are going to address this question, and we will be looking at a few examples of folk art where we do find a very strong and visible impact of modernism, of contemporary elements in their works of art. Now, this is true that the emergence of Indian modern art is partly a result of the breakdown of the traditional cultural matrix of India due to the advent of the British colonial rulers. We know that. Now, traditional Indian art, really speaking, as in court paintings and religious architectures, came to an end, or almost an end, because the sponsors, that is the rulers and the kings, they lost their financial power and therefore they were not able to sponsor them anymore. Now, we also know that the existence of another stream of traditional art that never came to an end and never suffered any major setback due to the colonial rule or colonial culture, and that is the rural folk and tribal art, the indigenous art practices all over the country. Now, various folk and tribal art forms have been able to sustain themselves till today with little or no intervention from outside. At times, various government organizations and NGOs have also played significant roles in the sustenance of these art traditions. The question is, has there been any impact of modernism on these folk art traditions or tribal art traditions or rural art traditions, or they remained confined within their own traditional and ritualistic subject matters, techniques and styles. Now, certain traditions and art forms of folk and tribal art, of course, remained close to their traditional values and did not show much tendency towards any change. They remained, so to say, unchanged. But there are many instances where the folk art forms show visible signs of change by adopting the contemporary themes, modern subject matters, and modern figures, that is, modern characters. However, the style of the folk art has always remained close to their original flavor, while the content changed substantially in many cases. And this is what is very interesting about those examples of folk arts where we do find an impact of modernism. That is, there is definitely very visible and immediately noticeable signs of change, mainly in terms of subject matter and content and the thematic choice. But as far as the style is concerned, as far as the pictorial configurations are concerned, as far as the aesthetic choices are concerned, most of these traditions, I will not say did not go for any change, but they went for very little change. By and large, the Madhubani painting remained Madhubani, in spite of the fact that Madhubani painters are doing some paintings based on contemporary themes, completely different from their mythological or traditional themes. So there are many such instances: Madhubani painting, Bengal Pata painting, Gond painting, Bhil painting, where you do find absolutely remarkable and visible changes, thematic changes, subject matter changes, but stylistically more or less remaining the same. Now, for example, if you look at the terracotta traditions, terracotta horses, also known as votive terracotta, are products of age-old customs and rituals in many places of India. And in the same tradition, by the same artists who are primarily potters, have also produced non-ritualistic clay figures reflecting the social changes taking place around. So there are moments in the history of traditional folk, rural, tribal art where the artists or the communities do respond to certain social and environmental changes, which means it is allowed, not that it is never allowed. But there is also the presence of a convention which is not exactly very oppressive, but pretty much there, very strong and very consistent, and therefore the need to change is not so much urgent. It becomes urgent when the artists themselves feel that there is something very urgent, something very significant has happened during my time, and let me address that within my pictorial language. And this is what they have done repeatedly, that is, reflecting the social changes taking place around. Now, these are two examples of somewhat traditional terracotta horses maintaining the traditional motifs of one horse, one elephant looking large animal with one human figure atop, that too under a kind of small little shelter canopy and with a shoulder. So this is, I would consider, conventional examples of votive terracotta horse and elephants. But now you have almost from the same tradition, similar traditions, terracotta figures, and using or reflecting on very contemporary and modern motifs like a scooter or a railway engine. So it is like as if the horse gets replaced by the modern locomotive engine or a scooter, but stylistically they more or less remain the same. You can even have an example like this where I see mother and child, and mother and child happens to be a very common theme in our folk traditions. As far as terracottas are concerned, paintings are concerned, various kinds of dolls are concerned, mother and child is a very common theme. So in terms of theme, it is not very uncommon, but what is uncommon? What is very modern in this particular work is the introduction of cycle as the vehicle. So mother and child on cycle has to be a modern take on the changing scenario around. And this is where many of these folk artists become very creatively free and very open to ideas, although the basic style and handling of medium and form remain more or less same. Adaptability in folk art makes the tradition modern and contemporary, although the style of representation may remain conventional. This is what exactly we were trying to say. Now, here you have again a brilliant example of folk art where a contemporary motif, very striking but almost very naturally introduced in this drawing, which is drawn in ballpoint pen. That is also a very modern tool on paper. So I'm sure you can find out, whereas rest of the motifs and elements in this drawing remain pretty conventional and they conform to certain folk styles and folk motifs and folk life. But suddenly, here you see a man with a briefcase held in his left hand who appears to be a very modern urban office goer. So this kind of very subtle introduction of modern motifs into the main body of folk painting can be considered as not total but partial influence of modernism, at least as motifs, on the folk art traditions. So mostly it is the thematic change. For example, when Ganga Devi drew and painted this railway engine, Ganga Devi belongs to a very traditional Madhubani painting school, who prior to this had never painted anything but mythological stories, Radha, Krishna and themes and goddesses and deities, devs and devis, mostly that. But now, when she started at a certain point drawing and painting independently, not on the Madhubani painting, not as Madhubani painting on wall, but Madhubani painting on paper. So the moment it is paper, which is again not a traditional surface to paint on, and therefore it is detached from its original context, that is original village, original house, original wall, that naturally inspired the artist and somebody like Ganga Devi, who was very creative, very talented, to do something which she won't be allowed to do on the wall. But because this is her individual, intimate drawing, her private drawing, a personal drawing, she can do it over here. So she introduces railway engines and she also draws roller coaster, which she must have seen in some fairground. So she is creating certain devices to depict the new motifs, the new experiences which were never there in the traditional Madhubani painting examples. Similarly, in Bengal Pata painting, you get to see these wonderful examples where the painter takes a big creative leap and liberty to introduce themes like Osama bin Laden, apparently, who was instrumental in attacking the Twin Towers in New York, which was a very, very sensational and an international news of a great devastation. And that was immediately, within a few months, responded to, addressed by these painters from folk Bengal cultural tradition who are known as Pattachitrakar. So these Patta paintings then do not have any traditional themes. They do not have any mythological motives. They only have now contemporary themes as far as these Patta paintings are concerned. But this also doesn't mean the traditional Patta paintings have been stopped. No, these painters continue to do that also. But simultaneously, they introduce these themes, contemporary themes, absolutely modern themes, within the same stylistic format, right? So you also have a painting again from Bengal, painted by the famous painter Swarna Chitrakar, and the theme is tsunami, because tsunami was a big kind of news those days. Everybody was shaken to know about the extremely devastating power of nature which had hit Indian coastal places. Therefore, that became a very sought after theme, a subject matter for some of these painters. And again, when this painter is doing this painting based on the theme tsunami, which was a very contemporary theme, she obviously did not give up her own stylistic method. So again and again we shall see this is happening, that when a traditional painter is addressing a non-traditional, contemporary, modern theme, the painter is not necessarily, in fact not at all, giving up their own stylistic method of representation. Even here, which is a very, very recent painting, as you can see, it is about the lockdown due to the COVID-19 situation, and you can see that the entire composition is or has to be a new imagination. They have never heard of lockdown before. Forget about corona or COVID-19. So first time they are experiencing this situation like most of us, and these painters decided to do a painting based on this new situation using their own traditional style. So they are arriving at a very strange and interesting art language where new themes, contemporary themes, absolutely fresh themes like lockdown, like corona, like COVID-19 situation can be addressed by using the age-old style. Now, Bengal folk painting tradition, which is also known as the Patta painting or Pattachitra, is not only confined to painted images on scroll paper with multiple frames format or rectangular single frame paper. Usually the painters sing the accompanying song aloud while they show the painting. So this is very interesting that this kind of art performances actually require not just the demonstration of the artwork, but also music, some performances, song, like you see in Bengal Patta painting tradition, or also in the far painting of Rajasthan. So basically these are audio visual performances. And now I'll be showing you two such performances created recently around this theme of COVID-19 and lockdown, and where you can once again see along with the song and the painting together using their traditional art styles, how powerfully, how strongly these folk artists can actually address absolutely new, hitherto unknown, unaddressed themes and subject matters like COVID-19.
নমস্কার, আমি আনোয়ার চিত্রকর। আমি করোনা ভাইরাস নিয়ে এই ছবিটা এঁকেছিলাম, যার মধ্যে আমি সামান্য গল্প দিয়েছি। গল্পটাকে আমি ছোট্ট করে গানের রূপ দিয়ে আমি শোনাবার চেষ্টা করছি। শোনেন শোনেন সর্বজন, শোনেন দিয়া মন, মহামারী এক অসুখের কথা করি নিবেদন। চীন প্রদেশে আবিষ্কৃত নাকি করোনার জন্ম, শ্বাসকষ্ট, সর্দি, কাশি, গলা ব্যথা জঘন্য। ঝড়ের গতি নিয়ে চলেছে কি করি হায় হায়, অহংকারী মানব জাতি বুঝি এবার মুছে যায়। বিজ্ঞানীরা দিশাহারা, ওষুধ নাহি পায়, লাখো লাখো হাজার মানুষ অকালে প্রাণ হারায়। রাষ্ট্রনেতা হেঁট করে মাথা লকডাউনে যায়, অকাল মৃত্যু বাঁচানোর একমাত্র উপায়। সারা বিশ্ব কাঁদছে যখন পরিজনদের তরে, চীনের ব্যবসা বাড়ছে দেখো প্রতি ঘরে ঘরে। হিংস্র প্রাণী আঘাত হানে বিশ্ববাসীর মনে, বিশ্ব বাজারে দিন কাটছে বসে ঘরের কোণে। ভগবান রূপে এলো কাছে ডাক্তার বাবুগণ, সাফাই কর্মী পুলিশ ফোর্স ছেড়ে পজিশন। ওই জাতি ধর্ম নিয়ে যখন দেশ ব্যস্ত হলো, কোভিড এসে দেশে দেশে নতুন শিক্ষা দিল। কোনটা আসল কোনটা ভালো বুঝতে নাহি পারি, সব জানতা হয়ে মোরা রাজনীতি করে মরি। অর্থনীতির বেহাল দশা, কুল কিনারা নাই, সময়ে এবার সত্যিকারের মানুষ হয়ে যায়। এইখানেতে শেষ করিলাম কবিতার বন্দনা, আমার নাম আনোয়ার চিত্রকর, নয়া হয় ঠিকানা।
শোনো শোনো গো দয়াল, তোমায় জানাবো কেমনে করোনা ভাইরাসের কথা শুনে বুক ফেটে যায় রে। তোমায় জানাবো কেমনে বিশ্ব জুড়ে শোকের ছায়া প্রতি ঘরে ঘরে। কারো বাবা কাঁদে, মাও কাঁদে, বিদেশে আছে কারো ছেলে। ঠাকুমারা কেঁদে বলে কেমন করে বাঁচি রে। তোমায় জানাবো কেমনে চীন থেকে এলো এই ভাইরাস মানুষের শরীরে। একজনের থেকে অনেক জনের হয়, বলছে বারে বারে। কফ কাশি জ্বর হলে, শ্বাসের কষ্ট পেলে, নাকে মুখে চাপা দিয়ে যাও হাসপাতালে। সাবান দিয়ে হাত ধুবে বারে বারে। হাঁচি কাশির সময়ে নাকে মুখে চাপা দেবে। নিজে বাঁচো অন্যকে বাঁচাও, দেশকে বাঁচাও রে। তোমায় জানাবো কেমনে হাজার হাজার মানুষ প্রাণ হারাচ্ছে করোনা ভাইরাসে। তাই প্রধানমন্ত্রী সবার জন্য লকডাউন ডেকেছে। আমি পটুয়া সবার কাছে অনুরোধ জানাই, গরিব দুঃখী ডাকে রে তোমায় জানাবো কেমনে
You can find out the whole range of expressions and the impact of modernity, the modern times, the contemporary times, on these traditions like Bengal Patachitra, where it is not just the picture but also the entire performance which absorbs modernism in its own way. Now we are looking at another example of folk painting, very famous example called, a very famous tradition called far painting from Rajasthan. This is an example of a traditional kind of painting with a little bit of differences. But even in far painting, some of these people like Kallan, Sham and many other artists, they've started painting themes directly related to the COVID-19 situation and mostly following the health guidelines circulated by the Government of India, Health Department, and creating what we called public awareness visuals along with text, but not done in a typical academic style or realistic style, but in the far painting style. This is again a very interesting situation for that any urban modernity can face. The fact that, or the idea that modernity also required a massive overhaul with the visual language is applicable to the modern art practices emerging from the city centers, from the urban centers. But what about these rural centers? There, modernity is perhaps more appropriate, more convincing, more effective when you do not give up your traditional style. And that is how you see, particularly during this latest COVID-19 situation, a lot of artists from different folk art traditions, be it Bengal or Rajasthan or Madhubani, people have been actually, many artists, addressing this COVID-19 situation using their folk styles. In Madhubani style, it is not just the painting, they're actually creating a text. Like what you see here is clearly written, the stay home, by an artist called Ambika Devi. But so even the letters have been, alphabets have been transformed into pictorial letters or pictographs, and within the pictographs you also see human figures with the mask. So therefore, masked human being in their own daily activities, but they are masked. A new accessory has been very readily absorbed and accepted within the fold of folk art traditions, and therefore you get to see a number of such paintings and drawings with a little mask on the face of this mother and two daughters here. Again, the washing of hands become a new important and health activity that needs to be conveyed again and again to your own community, your own public, your own viewers. Now this is an example of a traditional far painting of Rajasthan. Using the same format, you can see a COVID far painting of Rajasthan has been painted, where there are various instructions coming from the Government of India, from the Health Department, and how the entire world has been captured within one single far painting. Using that format of far painting, where you draw the entire painting not in terms of one frame, but in terms of several frames, several segments, several pockets of small little visualizations. And not only COVID, In recent times, we come across various subject matters, not only that they are contemporary, but sometimes extremely urgent and relevant subject matters. Like this far painting is on water conservation. There are many such Bengal water paintings addressing, for example, adult education, addressing the safety for women, addressing ecology, environment, and various other things which are not really traditional in the sense, nowhere related to mythology and traditional themes, but very urgent, very contemporary, and they need to be painted. The stories of these themes need to be told. So it is that sense of urgency which drove these artists to do something else. Now let us look at least one example of a reverse flow, because these interexchanges between modernism and folk did not follow one direction only. Folk art inspired the modern times, okay, and contemporary issues is one such direction, that is folk art inspired by the modern times and contemporary issues. But the reverse is also true when modern artists get inspired by folk art forms. Madhvi Parekh is a remarkable example from this category. She lives in Delhi and has been working for last many decades. Now, despite being a mainstream modern artist and located in urban center, she consciously avoided the urban modern idiom and chose to follow her own native cultural style of Gujarat. Therefore, when you look at Madhvi Parekh's paintings, it is difficult to realize in the first glance that she actually belongs to the mainstream urban modern art, because Madhvi Parekh's works in a very pronounced way evoke the sensations, the linguistic flavor of folk painting. May not be of one any specific place, but folk painting in general. And also the naive feeling, certain kind of less refined finish of the paintings and the figuration. Everything suggests that Madhvi Parekh has been looking at folk art, folk painting for her inspiration. Then you also have painters from Gond tradition, for example Jangar Singh Sham. Maybe his paintings do carry certain elements which are little conventional and traditional, but the way Jangar paints, draws, colors and composes these themes, they create a look of the modern and not necessarily very traditional or conventional, because when you look at Gond paintings painted for their own ritualistic needs, their textures, their characters, even the in terms of the linear refinement, they are different. Jangar Singh Sham kind of refines the whole tradition, addressing the modern art scenario, and no wonder the Jangar Singh Sham has been represented as a part of many modern art shows. Similarly, you have Durga Bai, again following folk art style. Even the subject matter does not have anything to do with necessarily very modern or contemporary, but it is the dislocation, decontextualization from its original context that makes these paintings very modern, very contemporary. Then you have Bhuri Bai, another very significant painter from the Bhil painting traditions, and you can see that she is really drawing very modern and contemporary objects like aeroplanes, like motor cars, different kinds of vehicles, all freely flowing into each other. So it is the fluidity of space that Bhuri Bai uses. She is excellent in exploiting the flexibility of the compositional space, wherein she puts all her motifs, and most of them are very modern motifs or motifs from the modern world. We also have somebody like Bhajju from Gond painting, who draws and paints absolutely independent and individual paintings, not connected to his traditional and ritualistic requirements, but using to some extent the traditional stylistic elements, but arriving at a new kind of form, idea, subject matter and composition. And therefore, here in this case and some other cases also, you see how these folk artists, Bhajju Shyam or Dhuri Bai, even the later works by Ganga Devi, through these works, they are shifting their location, position from being a purely folk artist to a very important artist in the mainstream modern art arena. And finally, we look at a few works by a very young artist, Avinash Karne, who hails from the Madhubani painting tradition, but he right from the beginning has decided to use the Madhubani style but address very contemporary subject matters in a remarkably fluid compositions, where you can see different pockets, different segments within the same painting, and therefore Avinash is able to say multiple stories, multiple narratives, something that we have already observed in the artworks by Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, by Bhupen Khakkar, by Nilima Sheikh. And now you see almost a similar approach to the narrative art, a new possibility of narrative art, but using very traditional Madhubani painting style. Therefore, with this last painting in today's lecture, you can feel that how another, almost simultaneously, another very strong tradition of modern art has been in existence, which may not have directly anything to do with the mainstream history, but they have been consciously later, but maybe in the beginning, slightly intuitively, these artists from the folk art traditions have been creating very creatively, with great amount of imagination, a parallel history of modern art. Thank you.